So with that, are there any specific items that you can call out, like, I wish we had more of this?
Yeah, it's very expensive to buy protein right now. If you've been in the grocery store, I'm fortunate enough that I have family members who are farmers, and so I've not had to buy beef. But if you look at beef prices, wow, they're expensive right now. It's great for farmers, not so great for us consumers having to purchase it right now. So protein is obviously always a good thing. But I know that it's not always an easy thing to donate. But protein is also really, peanut butter is a great protein. Cereal is always in high need. Milk, eggs, those are the things that we're out purchasing because we know they're healthy, but also kind of expensive right now for our guests. So if we can offset those costs.
Thank you for joining us. We know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending it with us.
This show is talking about beyond the blueprint and what happens kind of behind the scenes of the construction world, and also what happens in our lives from a family business and ranching and all the things that keep us building and moving forward.
And if there's something that you heard that resonates with you, whether it was a joke, an idea, please like this, share it with someone you know, and feel free to leave comments. We look forward to seeing what you have to say.
Let's dig in.
Well, welcome to this episode of Two Bees in a Podcast. I'm Brad Jans with Jans Corporation, joined again by my brother Brian. Today we are with Lori Dykstra of Feeding South Dakota, and we're going to learn a little bit more about their organization and how they help families in Sioux Falls and the entire state of South Dakota. Thanks for being with us today, Lori.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here and taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk about yourself and how you got involved in Feeding South Dakota, and then what that has looked like for the whole state. It's obviously been a challenging couple months for you, so we want to talk a little bit about that and what you're seeing for the future of food insecurity in our state.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about Lori, where you grew up, how you got into this world.
Yeah, so I say I'm from South Dakota because I was a military kid and moved everywhere until we landed in South Dakota when I was in middle school. And so I've left for a little while for a career, but definitely excited to come back. And I love Sioux Falls. I think it's such a great community. And growing up, I come from a large family, and so having all of our family close by in Sioux Falls is really nice too. So, yeah.
So what got you into the nonprofit world in Feeding South Dakota? How did that transpire to get you here?
Yeah, most of my career is spent in for-profit, and then prior to coming to Feeding South Dakota, I got asked to do some nonprofit work. But honestly, where nonprofit got started for me is my firstborn son. He passed away of cancer when he was 5. And I started an endowment at Sanford here in Sioux Falls, and we started raising money, which eventually became Cure Kids Cancer, and now they do tons of fundraisers. And so I kind of was doing that as like a side gig on the side of my job, really trying to raise awareness for kids with cancer. And then later, when this opportunity came up, I knew food insecurity I have a personal story with food insecurity, my family does, and it was really important to me. So it was kind of full circle moment. I never thought I'd work in nonprofit, and now I can never imagine going back to for-profit.
Sure. So you obviously have a passion for it. It's something that's true to you and to your heart, and so that's important. It's great.
So talking about food insecurity, what does that look like in South Dakota?
You know, right now, food insecurity is the highest it's been. Our food insecurity rate in South Dakota is the highest it's been in history. So Feeding South Dakota has been around for 50 years, and this is our highest food insecurity rates that we've seen. Feeding America puts out numbers every year, and the 2025 numbers were just astronomical. Almost 113,000, 700 and some food insecure individuals in South Dakota. 1 in 5 children are food insecure right now in South Dakota. That's higher than the pandemic. It's higher than prior to the pandemic. We're just seeing it continue to rise, and it's unfortunate, and we keep hoping that we're at that peak and we're going to see it steady out, but we haven't yet. So it's a pretty tough time right now.
So obviously the name of the organization is Feeding South Dakota. You're in Sioux Falls. So that's where we're having this conversation, but you cover the entire state. How does Sioux Falls compare to the rest of the state, and where are you seeing that biggest change in those rates happen?
I will say that if you look at sheer volume, Sioux Falls obviously has the most food insecure people, but we have the most population. I think that there's not enough programs in the Sioux Falls, the city of Sioux Falls, to really meet the needs. So there's a high demand here. But honestly, the really difficult part of our job is food insecurity in rural communities is very difficult. It's expensive to move food, as you'd expect, into these rural communities, and they don't have a lot of other options. There's food deserts, and then they have what we call food swamps. So that's if a desert is no grocery in the area, but what we call a food swamp is maybe it's only a gas station. So you're using your SNAP benefits or your last dollars to buy something from a gas station convenience store type of location, and that's all that's available.
How do you currently handle that need? I know you have multiple locations, but you can't have enough locations to cover the entire state for sure. So how do you handle some of that geography constraints across this? It's a big state, and there's a lot of gaps in between people.
Yeah, there is more cows than people here, right? So we cover all 66 counties, Feeding South Dakota. We have 3 distribution centers. So our largest is here in Sioux Falls. 95% of all of our food lands here in Sioux Falls, and then we distribute it out. We have 2 other centers. One is in Pierre and one is in Rapid City. And they each cover about a third of the distribution. Once we get food to them, they cover sort of the central side of the state, or central part of the state from Pierre, and the western from Rapid City. Sure. And we have trucks on the road every day. So if we have 17 trucks, and I think 11 of them-ish are on the road every day. We have semis that go back and forth to bring the food across the state and then into all those communities. Our smaller trucks drive every day to either deliver food to a partner or run a mobile distribution.
Good.
When you share some of the numbers that you did, what can you contribute to changes from the last 5, 10, 15 years?
You know, I'm not an I'm not an economy major, don't claim to be, but I definitely think our economy has shifted. There was some really good reports from Sioux Falls that were done by an organization here in Sioux Falls to check, the price of childcare, housing, all of these other things that we know impact individuals. But the cost of livings went up, and we all can see it in the grocery store. So that's one of the major, I think, changes. And I don't think our wage inflation has matched what our cost of living is. So we see a gap. But we also have 2 of the top 5 poorest counties in the country in our state. And those are covering our rural reservation areas. There's not a lot out there. There's not jobs in our rural communities for people, so they're not keeping up. We are seeing a lot of rural grocery stores close, which creates more of a gap, and they have to drive further to get groceries. So that cost of living is just really challenging. Then second to that, I would say that I think that while wages and all of that has been an issue, at the same time, I think some of our policies and things on the national level are impacting individuals and making it a little harder for them to get some benefits that would have helped them otherwise.
Sure.
So I think it's kind of twofold.
So you mentioned, obviously, you have a passion for nonprofits, and the food insecurity was something that was true to you. But what you've mentioned, we'll get more into more detail about it, but obviously in your role, you've got to kind of look at quite a few different things you need to be concerned with, like how do you get food? You've got to bring food in. Then you have to distribute that out to the people in need. And you mentioned truck drivers. I mean, those are all CDL drivers. That's a workforce that you wouldn't think would be a part of an industry that's a nonprofit trying to cure food insecurities. What was the biggest surprise for you taking this role as the executive director?
Staffing is a big one, for sure. I think, I feel like it was interesting. The previous executive director he said to me, "You won't believe how hard it is to give food away." And I was like, how hard can it be to give food away, right? That seems like it should be easy. But what I realize is that it's hard to source food. It's hard to source good, healthy food that people need to sustain them. And then also your you're constantly competing with other nonprofits to fundraise, and then you get into employee, how nonprofits are competing with for-profit companies to hire CDL drivers. In a time when I came on, CDL drivers were very hard to get, and we were competing with people who could pay a lot more. So I always say we can't be the top paying organization, but we shouldn't also be the bottom. So we have done some things to shift that, which I believe has attracted more people to work with us. But we get people because they want to be paid fairly, but also love the mission. And I think that's really important. We have that behind us. So the people who want to make the most money and don't really care about the mission aren't the ones who are going to come work at Feeding South Dakota anyway. But yeah, those are two probably big challenges: sourcing food and getting people and funds. Or 3 challenges, I guess.
Yeah.
That's 3.
Can you touch on some of the partnerships you have with both private entities, with individuals, some of your network of volunteers?
Yeah. So honestly, one of the things that I'm really proud about is, a lot of our corporate partnerships. You all work with us at one of our largest actually it is our largest mobile distribution in the state. Without volunteers, we can't get this work done. Our volunteer hours alone just last year in Sioux Falls and in Rapid, not our rural, not including what you all do at the mobile distributions, was the equivalent of 29 full-time employees. So I can't hire 29 more people, so you can imagine those volunteers are pretty important. How we get those volunteers are through our corporate partnerships. And Sioux Falls is amazing. They really step up and they give of their time, which is great. They encourage their employees, maybe give time off for your employees, allow that matching time or pay them for a day of service, and we make it as easy as possible to volunteer. And then in our rural communities, a lot of times it's our faith-based partners. Sure. Churches have been a long-time partner of food insecure companies or organizations, and I will say they can go up on a Sunday and say, we need volunteers on next Wednesday for the food distribution, and it's amazing how people raise their hand when they hear about it from their pastor or their preacher at the church. So it's pretty amazing. So really, partnerships between corporations and faith-based partnerships have really created the organization that we are today.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit on the sourcing food side of things, because obviously that has had some challenges too. Well, what are some of those partnerships that you have, and how does Feeding South Dakota acquire food, and how could other people help in that process too?
Yeah, so we currently get food a few different ways. We get food from our USDA programs. So really think about commodities. If, back in the day it was just called commodities, but now they call them USDA foods. So we get about a third of our food from commodity programs. We get food from our Feeding America network. So we're partnered with Feeding America. We can order food from them or get donated products. So if you think of a Kellogg's cereal company donates a truckload of cereal to Feeding America, we can go on and we can order that and have it shipped here. So we get it for the cost of shipping or sometimes completely free. The other way that we get food is through our retail rescue, or what we call retail rescue. So that's our partnerships, corporate partnerships with the Sam's Clubs, the Costco's, the Hy-Vees, all of the local groceries we pick up. The challenge is that all 3 of those have been decreased in the last 5 years. So post-COVID, retailers got smarter. They don't stock their shelves the same as they used to, which is a great business decision, but that excess went to food banks. So hurt food banks, but great business decision. Likewise, the network food has went down from Feeding America, and then within the last year, we've lost about 2 million pounds of food from the USDA programs, and those were through different either DOGE cuts, executive orders to the USDA post-COVID programs, as well as just currently not having a renewed farm bill, and TFAP has decreased.
Sure.
So TFAP is the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which is commodity program. So we've lost food in all 3 of those areas, and so it's really hit us hard, and it's even more important to source food for us now. We've had to decrease our amount of food out.
Last November there was a shutdown of the federal government. How did that impact the work that you do?
Yeah, we were, I think, and I'm probably not going to get this number right. I have so many numbers in my head, but it was around 150, 160,000 additional meals we served during that time. We had to turn away almost 500 families, and that's obviously not easy. We know that there was a lot of other unreported from our pantries and our partners of them having to either turn away, not having enough food. We cannot replace the SNAP. For every one meal we provide, SNAP provides 9.
Wow.
So if we lose SNAP benefits in a state like South Dakota, the need is so high that we cannot meet that gap. So we're working from behind at a time when food insecurity was already high. So, it's just been sort of, I say, a perfect storm. When I came in having, post-COVID, we actually had food insecurity rates drop considerably because if you think about it, people were at home, the government was sending out farm to food bank boxes, a lot of programs are in place to help people. When we got back to work and got back into sort of post-COVID world, the food insecurity rate started to rise, but the program started to go away. And that gap is covered by places like Feeding South Dakota. So
Sure.
that's where we're living right now, in that gap, and we have not been able to make up for that yet.
So, Lori, I've heard the term emergency response. What does that look like for Feeding South Dakota?
Oh, so I think emergency response right now, my post-COVID emergency response was us hitting mobile distribution. So you all partner with us on our mobile distribution. So you see that when we started prior to COVID, Feeding South Dakota was doing, maybe 20 mobiles across the state. And then the height of COVID and post-COVID, we were up to 120 every month across the state. And so you've been to one in Sioux Falls, and you can see how some of those challenges are. People are driving in at, like today, I think it's, below zero, very cold. And so people are coming in, we're having to deal with all of those things. But at the same time, in a rural community, when you're out in the middle of nowhere with no shelter belt, it's a lot more difficult. Right. We still today do about 110 every month. And it's not the most efficient way. It really is truly what should be an emergent response. It should not be the sustainable program in those communities. And so today, emergency response looks like that, or it could be when SNAP benefits get frozen or no longer available, we can get emergency food boxes out to our veterans, our seniors, our child hunger programs. It's different today. It's really program-centric, and I would say our wellness pantries as well is one of our big ways of people coming in through that system to get emergent food during times of either shutdown or lack of accessibility to food.
One thing you mentioned the mobile distribution that we're a part of, and one of the things I noticed, certainly in November, December, we saw a lot more people showing up, and unfortunately did have to turn some people away because we just ran out, and that's shifted a little bit. We've seen the beginning of the year there hasn't been as many people showing up, and the weather hasn't always been great, but it's also had some fair weather this winter. Can you touch on maybe what you think is happening with why all of a sudden with that turning back on, all of a sudden people aren't showing up? Because obviously the need is still there.
We're seeing a couple different things. So we always see a slight dip in January post-holiday. I don't know if that's because we don't have for sure data on this, but we believe it's because there's a lot of programs over Christmas that help families out a little bit, so they may see a little dip in that first part of January. We are seeing a dip in some of our immigrant population right now, and I don't know if that's just because what's going on in our climate.
Sure. Right.
I'm not hearing specific reasons, but we have seen a decrease, and that is that specific mobile that you are working at and talking about is definitely one where we see a larger immigrant population. So we have seen that decrease at the January.
Absolutely.
So we've seen a larger decrease this year than we normally would.
So maybe what we're hearing is as we're feeding South Dakota, it's really sometimes the federal work makes a big difference in how you can perform your job.
Yeah, I always say food shouldn't be political, but sometimes it's made political, and it's unfortunate because I just, we're here to feed people. I'm not, to me, I don't care what your affiliation is. I don't care if you're hungry and you need food. That's what a food bank is here to do. It's really, truly comes from, it started out with Sioux Falls Ministerial Association really believing that this was faith-based work and that it should be that we feed our neighbors when they need it, not asking too many questions about that
Right.
we're just giving out food and that's really what we're about. I hope that we can get back to that because I feel like that's at the core right now, just human decency and what we could
Absolutely.
be doing. So.
I know you mentioned earlier about additional expenses due to inflationary measures. Are there any other challenges that you see from the supply side?
I would say for us, when I came in, even getting a truck, we needed new trucks. Our trucks are breaking down, and that post-COVID getting equipment was very tough. And I think it took me 2.5 years to get our first truck replacement. So that was an interesting time. We kind of band-aided things, but equipment seems to be coming back around, and we're able to get our lifts and our some of our equipment, but food has still been challenging. And I will say that we are working hard with a lot of our retail partners across the state. We're working with some policy in Pierre this session. We'll be talking with different senators about and going to appropriations. I've been back there a couple times to talk about the need for food and really bringing food into South Dakota because we don't, even though we have more cows and people, we don't produce a lot of food that's packaged in South Dakota for human consumption.
Right.
A lot of it is for feed or other things. So Feeding South Dakota is a unique position for food banks in that we don't have access to a lot of food. We have to go outside of our state at times. So we need more dollars to be able to purchase food out. We are purchasing more food today than we ever have because of all the loss of the other program foods. So that supply chain, if we don't see it come back up in the donated product, we can't fundraise our way out of this, I guess is what I'm really trying to say, because it's just impossible to meet the need with straight fundraising dollars in South Dakota.
So obviously, us being in the construction industry, we try to keep an ear to what's coming. What are companies that are moving to the Sioux Falls in our area, and there's been a couple that are some food generation ones, CJ Foods and some cheese plant stuff. How attentive is Feeding South Dakota to those conversations, and should more manufacturing facilities or food product companies be coming to South Dakota?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think running your business in South Dakota is a great idea because we have very generous laws for businesses, and obviously it's an amazing place to raise a family, and definitely sold on that. An organization that brings food into South Dakota, we immediately try to meet with them and partner. A lot of times they'll already have a national partnership with Feeding America, so it's an easy in. But our current partners and small farmers are really good supporters of Feeding South Dakota. Our producers are some of our best supporters. We just started partnering with Baby Bell Cheese again. We've had partnership with them in the past, but we received 17,000 pounds of cheese in the last quarter from them,
Wow.
which is a lot of
That
cheese.
is a lot.
But very needed protein item for,
absolutely.
you can imagine those kind of healthy items, Dakota Layers, Prairie Farms, all of these businesses who are working with producers in our state, supporting farmers and producers in small communities. They're some of the ones who are giving us the milk that you see, the eggs that you see in our boxes. They're coming from the businesses who are ran and their families are here in South Dakota. So it's pretty amazing, the partnerships.
I know we've talked a little bit about COVID and the pandemic. What would you say, it was challenging for all businesses. Were there any positives or things you learned that were kind of takeaways that now you're like, wow, that was an opportunity for us to do things different?
Well, like I said, we started out with mobiles having, 20 so, or I'm not sure exactly the number, but ramping that up to 120. We realized we can move food and distribute food very efficiently, very quickly when needed, which is amazing for those emergency responses, but that really should be an emergency response. And so an inadverse effect to that was that we ended up, sometimes some of the small pantries in the small communities ended up shutting down because they said there's a mobile over here. They didn't feel safe having their volunteers interacting with a lot of people during that time, so they maybe shut down and they didn't reopen. So now the mobile's necessary. So it is an emergency response still happening because of that. So now we're in that process of shifting back the mindset of putting that same food. So if you think about a mobile distribution might be in a community of Kimball, South Dakota for 1 hour a month. So if you can't get to that food distribution during that 1 hour because you're working, and sometimes it's during the day, you miss it. But if we take that same semi-load of food and bring it and put it in a pantry, and they're open 5 hours a day, you can instantly see the equitable access that's created from that. So we need to make that shift back, and we learned a lot from that. Like, wow, while we can move food efficiently, it takes choice away from our guests and our neighbors, and it also takes accessibility away from our neighbors. So that really should remain an emergent response, or if there's no other option. The other thing is it did create a lot of need for people to start pantries again. These were ran by sometimes, I tell this story because one of our volunteers up in Mobridge, South Dakota asked me for succession planning. And she said, "Can you help us with succession planning?" I said, "Sure." She said, "I'm 91 and I'm going to retire in 2 years. And I need to make sure that this pantry stays open because my family has ran it for years as part of this church." And I thought, well, that's fair. I can help you with that. But also it really helped us realize that the sustainability of these programs means that we have to get our younger people involved in our communities and new businesses, and all of it has to come together, because if it's not important to the next generation, then it kind of goes away when they retire at 93 from their their pantry. So, yeah, I'm working on. She did get a succession plan, and she did retire. So,
Wow.
Great.
I'm sure she still
Last year.
volunteers. Yeah, I'm sure she still shows up, I bet.
she probably does.
You talked about the distribution points. You talked about the pantries and the need for those, but Feeding South Dakota is a lot more than that. You mentioned earlier that 1 in 5 kids have a food insecurity in our state. What are other things that Feeding South Dakota is doing to help get those needs? And I mean, there's just a lot of programs at this facility, and your facilities across state do. Like, what other programs are that people don't know about?
Yeah, I think a lot of people know us for our backpack program because that's our largest child hunger program. But it's so much more than that. We started really partnering with schools and doing a school pantry. We know that when the backpack goes home with a child, that's 8 pounds of food, and it doesn't feed the whole family. And sometimes they're going home and hiding it under their bed because they don't have enough for their siblings, and they feel bad, but they don't have enough to share. So how do we connect them to additional resources? So we started to then attach mobile distribution sheets in their backpacks so that they now know where the mobiles are in their neighborhood. But then a school pantry can be one step further. When the parents pick up, they can discreetly shop for the items they need, have choice again, and take enough food home. They can carry more food than a kindergartner can on their back, right? So those have been very successful, and we've seen some food insecurity needs being met very well by those programs. Then the other program that I think is really not known, or maybe we talk about senior boxes a lot and feeding our seniors, but another one that we're piloting here in Sioux Falls is a veterans box program, and we have 75 veterans that receive a box delivered to them through the VA every month, and it's a really vulnerable population, and I think sometimes it's something we don't necessarily talk about, and I think these are people who served our country, deserve to be taken care of, and it's sad that they're in a place that we need to get them food boxes. We also have put a pantry on the tiny home community that the veteran community has built here in Sioux Falls, and that program definitely needs to scale across the state. So those two programs, I would say, are probably the most under talked about, I guess, or not talked about. And then we're kind of new into the wellness pantry space in the last 5 years. We're doing a lot with our Sanford Kids Kitchen and Avera campus, and now we're going into the rural communities and giving out that emergent food when patients come in. And we have heard a really positive feedback from that. One thing I just heard today was more people are keeping their appointments for prenatal appointments because instead of using their last $20 to buy groceries, they can spend it on gas and come and get groceries and their prenatal visit.
That's great.
And so it's
Yeah,
positive.
probably not even something you assumed would be a positive, but absolutely, that's a win.
Love those.
Getting back to the backpack program too, I know that's with the parents being able to come in is a big change because I grew up with an older brother in school, and he was kind of mean to me, but so were other kids. And so, imagine, having kids come up getting, not everybody in school gets a backpack, so that can be kind of intimidating or maybe give them some self-consciousness that they don't need. So I know the Feeding South Dakota has considered that and looked at different ways to take that out of what already is tough growing up in school.
Yeah, we actually started the school pantry started in middle school and high school for that reason, because the kids weren't taking the backpack. They weren't taking it because of the stigma, right? You know, I said at the beginning of this that I had a food insecurity story. I was the free and reduced lunch child growing up for many years until I got into junior high, and so luckily I didn't have to have that. But it's a really hard time, right? No one wants to have anything that's different,
Right.
and certainly don't want to have the pink card. We had a pink lunch card versus like a
Sure.
manila or vanilla one that we used to punch. I'm definitely aging myself here. But everyone knew you were the free and
Right.
reduced lunch kid. So getting into middle school, we saw that stigma really affecting kids taking the food. So having the pantry allowed, they'll release the kids early so they can go get the food and put it in their car, go get it,
Nice.
have their families come in and get it. It's just gotten very creative and being able to make it something that hopefully doesn't impede the kids taking the food when they need it.
Sure. What would you say is a more like resilient future?
You know, I think it has to go back into the communities. You know, when we talked about those mobile distributions and the need for equitable access, we need a sustainable, equitable access, right? And sustainability comes with being of the community, from the community. So when you talk, you know, we're all in Sioux Falls, and we talk about what a great partnership we have with Jan's and with the church at First UMC and all of the volunteers. So that's a faith-based partnership with Feeding South Dakota and a local business that can help sponsor them, making sure that there's always volunteers and food there. If we have that same thing in small communities, it means longevity. It means that food source is going to be there for the long haul and create more hours of access. And then I would say it's more than that, educating the communities about hunger, hopefully removing those stigmas for kids, families, and knowing that food insecurity is in every county and affects your neighbor, the person sitting next to you in church, the person sitting next to you in school. It could be anyone. And so maybe being open to just knowing that it can affect anyone, and that maybe we just hopefully destigmatize it.
Sure.
You mentioned about like being into the wellness program type thing, you know, of working with the rural communities and their health systems. But, you know, another thing that I think Feeding South Dakota has focused on is not just empty calories. You know, you actually have dietitians on board that look at quality food that can be given to. How has that changed, and how has that progressed, and what do you see the future of that being?
Yeah, I'm very proud of our boxes today. I will say, starting, you know, food pantries were started by donated products, so you get whatever you get and you give it out, right? But we have a philosophy here at Feeding South Dakota that if we wouldn't serve it to our own families, we shouldn't be serving it to our guests. And so this isn't a place for garbage that comes out of a retail store that should be in a dumpster. That still should go to a dumpster.
Sure.
So one, just really making sure that if we're purchasing more food, which we are, we have a choice. We get to choose what we pick to put in those boxes. So we have a goal from Feeding America that we have to meet to be 70% foods to encourage. Feeding South Dakota goes above and beyond that, and we do 75% foods to encourage. I'm really proud that today we remain at that 75 or a little higher, and our partners have gotten on board. So now Costco's and Hy-Vee's, and they're like, oh, we want to keep that foods to encourage up. And so they're making sure that it's not just the cakes and the breads and the cookies that they're giving us, although everyone needs a cookie and cake every once in a while, but making sure that they're really trying to focus on what items do we have that we can get to the food bank that is going to encourage health for our neighbors, because we know that that's going to help them.
Right.
So with that, are there any specific items that you can call out, like, I wish we had more of this?
Yeah, it's very expensive to buy protein right now. If you've been in the grocery store, I'm fortunate enough that I have family members who are farmers, and so I've not had to buy beef. But if you look at beef prices, wow, they're expensive right now. It's great for farmers, not so great for us consumers having to purchase it right now. So protein is obviously always a good thing. But I know that it's not always an easy thing to donate. But protein is also really, peanut butter is a great protein. Cereal is always in high need. Milk, eggs, those are the things that we're out purchasing because we know they're healthy, but also kind of expensive right now for our guests. So if we can offset those costs.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
just through our distribution point, the milk has been one that was always asked for, and it was given out quite a bit, and we're trying to find ways to bring that back and get that as an ongoing thing just at our distribution point, making sure that we can provide that, because that goes a long way.
Yeah, gallon of milk is very expensive right
It
now
is.
compared to what it was
Right.
7-8 years ago, and so it's just not something we get donated as often.
Right. What kind of regulations do you have to deal with? Obviously, people donate, and they can't donate just everything. So how do you deal in the regulations? I'm sure the USDA is involved a little bit.
Yeah, we have a clean room here, so we are FDA and USDA inspected, but USDA, we have a lot. I didn't work in food industry before this, and there's a lot of regulations in food,
Right.
which you want because you want safe
Right,
food
yeah.
to get out to people. But we have one of the things that's really hard, and we're working on it with some of cattlemen, and especially the Cattlemen Foundation is such a good supporter of ours. But we have a lot of farmers who want to give us, like maybe they had to take in a one of their cows and make it into just all ground beef, and they're like, I would love to donate that to the food bank. If it doesn't go through a USDA inspected and packaged in a USDA inspected packaging plant, which is very few in South Dakota, it says not for sale, right? That's what's in our freezer. We can't take it if it says not for sale, which is
Okay.
unfortunate because it's the best beef that we
Right.
can
Yeah.
get, right? I can't purchase that on the network. So it's really hard. We're trying to work on that just to get a farm to food bank program going so that we can maybe eliminate some of those barriers because we know that it's packaged in a good place and that our guests would love to have that product. So there is limitations on what we can take.
Like you said before, it's something you would serve your family, so
Yeah.
why can't
Yeah.
you serve it to the public? Yeah.
It's better than anything we can go and buy in the grocery store. So it's really hard. And the farmers are got such big hearts; they really want to
Right.
give this. And I'm like, I would love to take it. So we're working on that.
Great.
But those are just everything in that frame of mind. If it is something that says not for sale or has certain expiration dates, we have to follow those.
So I remember as a kid too, bringing canned goods or anything that was under the title of non-perishable. But what are some things that you can accept that maybe people don't know about?
I'm trying to think of, I think one thing is so I just mentioned expiration dates, which is kind of weird because I've learned a lot about food expiration dates. And one of the things I always ask people is, do you know why Girl Scout cookies expire in September every year?
Because the new ones are coming out.
Exactly. They want to sell you more cookies, right? I was a Girl Scout. We want to sell you more cookies. It's not because it expires. It actually has another year. So we follow the USDA guidelines on expiration dates. So go to our website. There's a USDA guidelines on there that will show you what expiration. So even if it's a canned good that might have 18 months on it, but it's maybe 2 months expired and you're going to throw it out, don't throw that out, donate it because it is still a good product. It's just that shelf life. And so that's what we get from retail stores too. So sometimes people will say, hey, I saw expired food in your box. There's a note in every box in Spanish and in English, and it will tell you why we do that, because the food is still good. We do not give out bad food. If it is bad, we throw it away. But if it is expired, it doesn't necessarily mean it's expired by USDA guidelines. So we have a big thing on our wall downstairs, and I had to kind of go home and own with my own son. He would always say, the milk's good as long as you smell it, Mom.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was right because it actually wasn't. The minute it expired, I was like,
Right.
it's got to go. And he was like, no, it's got another week. I'm like, all right, it does.
I'm glad you said that because that has been a debate in our house. I'm definitely you taste it, then you know it's bad. My wife is not of that couch, so I hope she's watching this because I will admit I probably have stuff that has a 5-year-old past due date on that. I get that's probably a little too long.
Definitely probably too long. But I'm happy to, help
Yeah,
you with your
I appreciate
argument at
that,
home
yeah,
with the
yeah.
milk because
Yeah.
I was definitely wrong about that too. So
Must be genetic. I'm the same way. I'm like, smells okay. It's not
Right.
lumpy. Let's have it. And then my wife too is like, nope, this expires tomorrow.
Right.
Let's just make room now.
yep. Same thing in our house.
So from a personal standpoint, from our family, our grandfather was a rancher out west, and we know he supported Feeding South Dakota for a long time, and that kind of passed through the generations. And so we've always kind of had that push and that drive to get involved. And one of the exciting things that just happened at the end of last year, we are in the EOS process. We've been doing this for about a year and a half, the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, if you're familiar with that. And at the end of the year, you have a 2-day annual with your leadership team, and you talk about, what are your goals and missions and big drive for the coming year. And we started talking about, as Jan's Corporation and a family of companies, we've always been some philanthropic a little bit. In fact, one of our core values is community involvement. We want our people to be involved in community, to serve, to give back. We want them to live that like we do, but also means being involved in our own community, being involved in the company. And so during that conversation, we started talking about we have been a part of a lot of nonprofits, and we said how could we make a bigger impact in one area rather than giving a little to a lot? Could we do a lot with one? And in that conversation, we decided food insecurity was a focus that we are going to drive forward, and getting everybody on that boat and driving in that direction. That when we look at any type of way we can give, food insecurity is going to be the first thing we talk about. Kind of as you mentioned, taking politics out of things. Food insecurity is certainly something that is affected by everybody. We all need food. We all have to live off of food. We can't live without that. And so it's just a known fact. We have to have it. And so as a company that's decided to focus on that, what are some things that we could do to create programs within our organization, to get more involved with Feeding South Dakota, how to partner with you to get everybody from even just the percentages would say that with 70 employees in our family, we've got probably some people within our own team that between them and their families, there's food insecurity internally. How do we address some of those needs and issues and make it a focus?
Well, first of all, this is the first time I'm hearing
It
that.
is,
That's
yes.
great. Thank you for making food insecurity your mission as well, because we can't do this without partnerships like this. So, first of all, I also would say that likely you do have someone in your organization that's food insecure, because it doesn't necessarily, food insecurity is not necessarily a chronic thing. It can be a one-time thing. We're all, a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck or one medical situation away
Right.
from being in a food line. They may use our food distribution one time or several times, right? So I think that it's important to recognize that, and that you already have done that. That's step one, because I think a lot of times businesses think, we pay fair wages, we do this, but it's not necessarily about your
Right.
wages. I think there was a new study that was just out in Sioux Falls. It's not the poverty level in Sioux Falls is the real poverty level is 130,000. I kind of gulped. I was like,
Right.
that's a lot for a family of
Right.
4. But when you think about daycare costs and everything, so it is challenging. You can be making a really decent wage and still be struggling. So I think that first of all, just takes some recognition, recognizing that you all see that in your organization and care about it is important. So I think businesses can do a lot. Employees spend a lot of their time with you. And so hearing about programs and knowing that you all support things that are near and dear to them is important. And I think one of the ways is educating them on the programs that you are a part of. So the mobile distributions that you're doing, it's not just showing up and being there or putting dollars there, but you all put manpower in. You come and bring equipment in, and you help us. It helps our organization immensely, because we can't have that kind of equipment readily available at all times. But then having days of service, we just had a Bring Your Child to Serve Day here at Feeding South Dakota. We partner with a lot of our businesses as well to say, can we do an evening distribution where you can bring your or an evening pack where you bring your kids in, or any of those times where you can get your employees together. One, it's a really great team building. We do get, I think we talked earlier about SDSU, USD. Sometimes we get a little friendly competition going. One day we had SDSU and USDA in here and got real heated. But, it's really fun to get your team in and do that. So I would say encouraging those volunteering together situations, and that doesn't have to be just in your one location. It can be throughout the state, because we have mobile distributions in 120 communities. So if you're able to put your volunteer hours in your community, it's more meaningful sometimes too, because they have a harder time. And then giving matching gifts, things like that. A lot of businesses do that. So if I appreciate when organizations, if I'm giving to something that they care about and they're matching that, it's a really great way to invest in your people and what they care about. So maybe they care about the small food pantry at their church.
Sure.
And if they want to give their dollars directly there, being able to match that is pretty important too.
Absolutely. That's great.
Good
That's a great idea for sure. And one of the things that we found was just, education, just getting information in front of people. I know you've had a couple open houses here, and I've had a couple employees that came over and walked through, and just some of the cards you had up of, the numbers, the statistics of who is food insecure was important. Is that something your team could do, is come to like a corporate event and just speak and, kind of just inform, share some more information on how to get involved, what are the numbers, what is the needs?
Yeah, we have a community engagement team, and they love that stuff. They love to go and do luncheons at businesses. They go to schools and talk to kids and really try to destigmatize it in the children, with children too. But it's a great way for us to share about our program, so people then know if they ever need that service. Right. But also, it's a great way for them to get involved if they need an entry point of getting involved, either in packing boxes or even education, because I will say policy change, even though food is not political, policy change will allow for us to continue this work. Right. And so when it's time for us to advocate on behalf, we can educate our partners and our guests, but if they're reaching out to their representatives and saying, hey, we think you should support this thing that supports food insecurity in our state, it's really important.
Right.
So
when they go to the polls and vote, they actually know what they're voting for.
Yeah.
So, Lori, I was going to ask, with your time in this role, I'm sure you've came across a lot of situations where you've really felt what you're doing is meaningful. Is there anything with a client or a situation that you could share that just made you feel like everything was worth it?
Yeah, I've had too many stories. Sometimes it's hard, but I still remember my first story. I wrote, one of my goals when I first came in is to ride on the truck with all the guys, and they didn't always love that, by the way, but I had a blast.
I would ask to drive it. I would have been like, can I drive this thing? Yeah.
They did not let me drive. That's probably a good idea. I don't have a CDL, so I still have nightmares about trying to back up a cattle trailer, so let's not give me a CDL to drive. But we were down in Vermilion at the Vermilion Food Pantry, and I think this was probably like 3 weeks into the job, and we were delivering to an agency, and we were delivering that day. We had plums on the menu, so we were putting plums in the agency partner, and there was a young mom and her daughter who was probably preschool age. I think she said she was 4, and she had never seen a plum before. And I thought, wait, what do you mean you've never seen a plum? We take for granted that, she had never seen a plum. She kept asking, what is this? She was so excited. And I was telling her it's a plum, and her mom said she's never had one before. And she said, is it a fruit? And I said, yeah, it's a fruit. And so then the very nice woman who was volunteering there decided to wash it for her so she could try it. And just watching this girl bite into this plum and just seeing the joy on her face, I was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing here. But I went home and told my picky teenagers, like, seriously, this young girl was so excited to have a plum, and you are like not even eating the fruit, you're letting it rot in the fridge. We might have had some contention at home that week, but it really goes to show that sometimes healthy options aren't what families go for, because they go for maybe those non-perishable items that are cheaper. And we always say people shop the center of the grocery store, not necessarily the wraparound, which is usually your fresh foods and meats and things that can be more expensive. But I still remember her joy on her face, and then she told her mom, she said, this is better than the fruit snacks. And I was like,
wow.
Yes. Because she never had one. It was really, it was a USDA, really
awesome.
Good plum. So that one, and then I do have one other story that really hits hard for me. As a person who's had a sick child, I had a family come into our distribution center here in Sioux Falls, because we used to have a pantry, and the pantry's closed. And they said, oh, we thought you had a food pantry here. They were so just sad to see that there's no food here. We got them to the resources, but I was talking to, it was a mom and a dad, and there was an older son with them, maybe 12. And they said, well, the dad works at a packing plant here and just received a 50-cent increase in his pay, and it put him over the limit to qualify for services. So they were getting, after mom worked at one of the schools here in town as like a para, and they had after school care for their 4 children, and one of the other things they had is food assistance at school. And then the third thing that they had, which is very important to them, is this 12-year-old had a medical condition. He was diabetic and had a pump, and the services cost, I believe, $1,200 a month. Wow. And they had that paid for. They were going to lose all of these services, and so they were in the food line. And he was asking his employer, can you not give me the 50-cent
Right.
raise? And they said, well, we can, but you have to backdate it, and it was going to take some time. They were trying to make the difficult decision between food and their child's health. And do we, be humble and walk into this
Right.
food bank and get food, or do we, do what we know is right? And I'm going to tell you, as parents, we know what the decision would be. We would do what we needed to do to help our kid. But those are decisions our families shouldn't have to make, but make every day. Do I buy medicine or do I get food? And it's really challenging. But that one has not set well with me, because that talks more to that cliff effect of we have people who make just enough to get by, but not enough to fully
Right.
Thrive.
support,
Yeah.
thrive.
And there's certainly those thresholds that employers don't know about, and so talking about that, just we could be guilty of that ourselves, of giving somebody a raise and not knowing that may have affected them more than not doing it.
Yeah. And no disrespect to the organization who gave the raise, they thought they were doing the right thing,
Right.
and but it's just amazing that 50-cent raise
Right.
could do something like that,
It's
right?
crazy. So Lori, if budgets weren't an issue or the donations weren't an issue, if you had unlimited budget, unlimited resources, what's the one thing you would do to change Feeding South Dakota?
That's a big question. Ensuring that we had enough food for the nearly 114,000 individuals who are food insecure, I would say that would be, for me right now, first and foremost, feed first. And
Sure.
then second would be to hopefully educate and do more advocacy to get them out of the line, right? The idea is that we want to help people thrive and not just continue to utilize the services. So what can we do? Food is that first entry point. Sometimes people need to get to that job interview, to get through that test in school. And so I always say food's an entry point. If we can get them the nutritious food they need, they're going to get to that next step and then hopefully get on to bettering their
Sure.
situation.
It's kind of it's that old adage of, you can feed a man a fish, but if you teach him to fish, he'll eat for days. So some of that support, that's great.
That's work we can't get to right now, because we're trying to fill the need and just continue to feed the line, and we're not keeping up. And so my goal is to be able to keep up so that we can get to that work, because it's so important.
So to all of our listeners out there, what are 3 things you would say community members, wherever they're at, what could they do to help?
I think get involved in your community. Understand what organizations. We have partners across the entire state, so every community likely has some food program in their community. So get involved, meaning educate yourself and understand it. Volunteer there if you can. They need hours, so just like we need the FTE hours here, they definitely need it in the small communities. And then donate, whether that's food or dollars, whatever you're able to. I think those are 3 ways that you can do, a food drive to educate or really help support that community.
What's the best way for somebody who wants to volunteer time? What's the best way for them to start that process?
I think going to our website, feedingsouthdakota.org, click on the volunteer link, and we try to make it really easy to volunteer here in our buildings. I would say the small town communities, if you're not in Sioux Falls, still contact us, because we can connect you with those small town partnerships, because sometimes they may not have the website engine to get you to sign up, but sometimes they need it more than we do here in the bigger, or what I call urban areas in South Dakota.
So Laura, thinking big picture, 5 years down the road, what do you see Feeding South Dakota be as your 5-year vision?
Yeah, as we just celebrated our 50th anniversary, the next 5 years is key for this organization. We need to be able to fill that bucket. So we have to have enough food to feed everyone who's food insecure, and food first, as I say. But the next step is really, how do we address root causes? If we don't start to address root causes in our state, this food insecurity, it's just going to be a perpetual issue. Do I think that we can end hunger in South Dakota? No. Let's be honest, it's not going to end. There's always going to be someone who's going to be struggling. But can we reduce it? Absolutely. And the only way to do that is to start addressing root causes. And hopefully we can get to that in the next 5 years. That's
Absolutely.
the real goal.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Lori, I want to thank you for your time. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to visit and the involvement that we have with Feeding South Dakota. We'll continue to support the mission and help in any way that we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all you do for the organization. It's been a blessing to work with you and see what your passion for food insecurity is and how you're carrying this mission across to all you do. So we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
We appreciate you listening. Everything we do is a collaboration, and we appreciate you being here to share this with us.
Yeah, our goal is always the same, to build relationships, to build structures, and to tell the stories that we've experienced along the way.
Feel free to drop us a comment, share it with a friend, and like this podcast.
Or call me if you just want to talk about cows.
So until next time,
Keep building. No, get out of here.